It's becoming more and more of the visual beast people want. I pop in photography, I pop in video. So I'm very happy to present Stephanie Kelly, and she is here today to talk to you about the importance of hotel photography.
Can everyone hear me okay? In the back? Perfect. Hi, my name is Stephanie Kelly. I am a Denver-based hospitality photographer, so I specialize in hotels and restaurants pretty much exclusively. I have worked with brands all the way up to Waldorf Astoria, Ritz-Carlton, Hilton, and Marriott properties, but also smaller boutique properties, B&Bs, and adventure lodges. So today we're going to kind of cover 3 different sections. During this, please feel free to raise your hand and stop me at any point to ask questions. Otherwise, I may ramble for too long, but I want to talk a little bit about the value of investing in hiring professional photographers. I'll kind of talk a little bit about my specialty there too. I'll talk a little bit about some DIY tips if you are planning or need to use your iPhone. iPhone cameras have come such a long way, so they are great tools to add to your repertoire. And then again, we'll talk a little bit about leveraging influencer marketing. I do come from an influencer marketing background, so excited to kind of merge those 2 things today. Before I get too much into it, a little bit about specifically what I do working with hotels and restaurants. I am not a typical interior photographer, where you come by for 5 days and give them $20,000 and you get a handful of photos. I kind of specialize in full service packages from interiors, lifestyle, food and bev, and kind of talk a little bit more about the approachable ways for you guys to get your images. Quick note on social media, show of hands, how many people here have a social media account for their property? Hopefully most everyone. Awesome. So yeah, I found some quick stats on that today. As I mentioned, we are going into a social media heavy world. I thought this first one, personally for me, was kind of surprising, but 2 in 5 Americans now use TikTok as a search engine and prefer that over Google, especially Gen Z and millennial audiences, which are the people who are now starting to go out and have the money to travel and are probably booking properties. 61% of people have booked a hotel after seeing it on their Instagram feed. And about 75% of travelers, including myself, use social media platforms like TikTok, Instagram, and Pinterest for their travel inspiration and research. So if you don't already have a social media account for your property, I definitely recommend doing that. Some of the tips I'll talk about kind of are more focused on organic content and yeah, so kind of talking a little bit. So listings with professional photos on average typically will receive 40% more bookings. I don't know how many of you guys have booked a hotel or a restaurant, especially after checking out their Instagram or their menu photos and deciding that looks great and you want to eat there. So we are all definitely influenced by photography. In a digital world where the market is very saturated, people make decisions in seconds. If you have scroll stopping beautiful images, you're more likely to get more engagement happen for your property. If you have poorly lit photos that aren't super interesting, they're going to scroll by before you even get a chance to pitch your property. So talking a little bit about the visual appeal, obviously guests are attracted to clean, well-lit, and organized spaces. Photos should be highlighting what makes your space unique and desirable, whether that's you have a great view, you have luxury linens, you have special things you want to offer in your lobby. So not just even outside your room photography, but just things if you are an adventure property and you do horseback riding, there's all kinds of things that you should be including in even just third-party booking listings to really sell the experience of your property to them. And I would say the one thing you should take away from this entire presentation is that your photos are basically a digital storefront. They are your welcome mat, they are your please come stay here, and they are the first impression of your property, and bad photos and bad media will cost you before you can get a chance to pick yourself. My favorite thing about what I do with hotels and photography with them is really focusing on emotional connections. Like I mentioned, I'm not just a standard interiors photographer. I tend to actually specialize more in photos like this, which are more lifestyle, helping guests to envision themselves in the space. When guests are looking, a lot of times, even for business, but mostly for pleasure, they're kind of envisioning what their vacation's gonna look like. If they're going on a girls' trip weekend, if they're going on a romantic getaway, they just need a staycation. Their emotions are helping them decide at the end of the day where they're going to stay outside of location and price. So really having images that help them create that emotional connection with your property before you even get there is really beneficial in helping them to hopefully transition into a booking. Yeah, like I kind of mentioned already, but photos do create connection. before arrival. So it is also a lot about the atmosphere. So not every single property is unique. You tend to lean more into luxury property with really unique architecture. If you're more homey, cozy B&B feel, if you're an adventure property, making sure that you're not necessarily just doing what everyone else is doing, and kind of specifying your images and your videos and all of your media into identifying your target audience and pulling them in. So even just little notes like if your target demographic is in their 30s and 40s, if you're using models, make sure you're not using people who are in their teens and 20s, to really help just pull in and target that specific demographic. So just little details can make a difference too. If you have, cozy fabrics, putting nice folded towels on bedding, unique decor, just anything that can kind of create a more special feel for them in the imagery. So kind of a little bit of self-plugging what I do as well myself here, but kind of what some of the benefits of hiring a professional photographer. I know everyone will say like iPhones take great photos. They do. I have some sections we'll talk about some tips there. But some things that just are a little bit different from just having a camera and being able to use them. So a lot of it goes into framing and composition, and also lighting. So I'll talk a little bit about that. But the reason that you shouldn't trust someone like me to come in and do your interiors or your property photos is because we're able to identify a space, maybe identify some of the weaknesses and avoid those, and just really hone in. If let's say you have a room that's not super well lit, maybe it's kind of sparse and basic, but you have a beautiful view of the mountains and really highlighting that in the imagery versus just showing the entire room. Or even things like, I'm sure we've all been duped by the super wide angle lens that makes the rooms look big and you get in and they're super tiny. So I'm trying to avoid things like that that might kind of lose trust with your audience and your potential customers. Also, lighting is definitely something I'm sure all of us have run into if you've tried to take an iPhone photo of a hotel room before, but we are experts in trying to manage challenging lighting situations or create artificial lighting situations that relay the mood that you're trying to go for. My favorite thing to talk about why you should hire a professional photographer is just the time saving. So doing it yourself definitely takes a lot more time and effort. Hiring someone takes a lot of that off your plate because you don't have to worry about learning how to use a camera, trying to figure out the different angles, trying to edit them later. If you hire someone who are especially specialized in full service, they can handle everything for you from the planning, shot lists, models, delivery of images. So all you should have to do is decide on a date and a time, and then you'll end up with a huge gallery of beautiful images afterwards so that you can then spend your time and energy on running your businesses and doing what you do best, which is probably customer service and guest experience. One thing that I also like to talk about, so a lot of my clients actually have me on quarterly or even monthly retainers where I'm going in and constantly updating images for them, and a lot of that has to do with just consistency. So sometimes I see clients that their big mistake is when they first open, they pay several tens of thousands of dollars to have an interior photographer come in. They have these beautiful images, but then moving forward, they do not have the budget to keep up those images, and sometimes that can cause guest distrust if they see one beautiful image and then a really great report image in the next slide. It can kind of make them think, what am I really going to get when I get there? So hiring someone on a somewhat regular basis, even annually, it does help create consistency across your platforms, especially with your brand. And I'll have some examples I'll go over here in a little bit, especially for social media, I would say. And it also does signal that you are taking your brand seriously and that you do care a lot about guest confidence and professionalism on the brand side. Yes. Yeah, so here's some kind of examples. These are all three clients that I work with. Not every single image on here is one of mine, but just to kind of go over three clients that are in Denver and the surrounding areas that are in a similar market but have completely different target demographics. And hopefully you might be able to get these, a lot of families. It's very nice spa, so they tend to really focus their imagery on families and kind of that cozy, great ski environment. They actually don't focus that much on skiing, even though they're right on the mountain, because their demographic is more just there for the luxury vibes. They do get a lot of international guests, and they definitely push more towards a 5-star luxury experience. Limelight here in the middle, they actually have two properties, but this one is in Denver. It's actually right by Union Station. Their demographic is a little bit different because it is a little bit more cozy lodge vibe, but they have a lot of cool amenities like Therabody and things like that. So their demographic is more 20s and 30s who want to go skiing, but then spend the rest of their weekend down in Denver going to the bars and restaurants. So still skiing and get on the mountain, but they're staying back here at the end of the day. And then kind of in the middle, Hotel Alpenrock is actually a new Hilton property up in Breckenridge. So Breckenridge, if any of you are familiar, is a little bit more of a relaxed ski town than a Vail or an Aspen. So they kind of are trying to balance being, they are a 4-star property, but they don't have a spa, but they do have cool things like ski valets and other amenities on top of that. So they're trying to kind of target that interesting demographic that wants to spend the weekend skiing, they don't necessarily want to cram 10 of their friends into a one cabin. So just some kind of examples on how keeping your brand imagery consistent. You do not have to hire a professional photographer to do every single photo. Like I mentioned, probably about 2/3 of these, and each of them are mine. Some of them are UGC, which we'll get into from influencers or guests, but just a little bit of an overview of how we same but different. And kind of before I wrap up this section, something I think is really important to talk about is just going beyond interiors, and this does kind of go back into creating that emotional connection. These are all images that I've created for clients, but just really things that help the guests envision themselves there, whether that's great food, if it's a girls' weekend in the mountains, a pool day on the roof, breakfast in bed. There's just a lot of variety of images, and a lot of these you could recreate and take with an iPhone as well, especially showing for dog friendly, very popular right now as well. But just going beyond the typical interior, classic interior photography. Yeah, so before I get into kind of my tips for if you're using an iPhone or you want to do it yourself, does anyone have any questions about that first section? Yes.
I'm kind of curious if you so you get contacted and you show up and you shoot some photos for a property, and then let's say the property has like a remodel or they change a lot of decor. Like how often do people come back and say, oh, can you come back and shoot the new place, or oh, we'll just leave the outdated images up there? How often does that happen?
That happens very often that I would say that I'm coming back. Not hospitality, but not related. I was actually just this morning reshooting punch bowls for a restaurant because it changed the shape of the bowls and wanted them to be updated. So yeah, I would say it's very important. A lot of properties do have me come back to do remodels. I have one coming up in Cheyenne out of Best Western did a whole remodel. But yeah, I would say it's very important. They typically want to keep, especially interiors, but even just updating new amenities, just fresh content. A lot of clients don't want to use like the exact same photos over and over and over again if they're on social media. Great question. It does happen more than you might think.
Our property is dominated by black issue. We're in this property, so it's sort of right? In my household, the gal that I'm married to makes all of our buying decision making. Period.
Yep.
So when you go to photography in social media, I mean, should you just be leaning towards
Yeah, that's a great question. I can kind of backtrack a little bit to kind of, I would say, I would agree with that a lot of these is definitely, and just social media users in general are more geared towards the female gaze. I know as a here I typically tend to make decisions on where we're staying as well. I will say though, I do also work, for example, with a adventure property out in Moab that is a luxury. They're called Redcliff Lodge. They have things like whitewater rafting, skydiving, base jumping, things like that, and they do have a lot of success. They have a Broncos driving experience, and I think highlighting that as well because I know at least because I care about my husband's experience, even though I might be the one making the decision, it's nice for me if I saw something like, oh great, I can have my fun day at the spa. There are things here at this property that I can send him off to do, and he's not going to bother me while we relax here. So yeah, I'd say I imagine that can be tough, but I do know that especially Gen Z and millennial men are using social media at a significantly higher rate than Gen X and above. So I think leaning into that, like there are entire travel influencers who are only men who are doing a lot of great work with kind of showcasing properties too.
Follow up, and I've been told this recently by someone who does marketing in the spa world and has been forever. But like you said, Pinterest. She said Pinterest. And what the heck? Pinterest? What I mean, this is.
It's coming back. It's coming back. It's having a resurgence. Yeah, yeah. I would say Pinterest, and a lot of nice things is that that's a whole other topic on Pinterest marketing. But the nice thing is Pinterest, if you end up looking into it, does have a lot of integrations where you can set things where, hey, if I post something on Instagram, it will automatically post it to my Pinterest account. I know when I plan, I just was in Barcelona last week with a friend of mine, but I went to Pinterest to plan my entire trip, and there were some hotels on there, there's some restaurants, activities. But yeah, Pinterest is definitely still, I'd say, a pretty high tier for marketing as far as trip planning, especially if you're looking like out of town. Yes. speaking of fly fishing, I actually did have an influencer friend who I've her statistics for later, but she was just invited out of town to go do a fly fishing expedition for that. So I think it's also stuff like that also is impacting female markets as well. Anything else for now? Awesome. So yeah, I think I had created like a very quick PDF guide. I am not a professional iPhone photographer, but did start out obviously taking photos on my iPhone as well. And I apologize to anyone here who is an Android user. I've always been an iPhone user, so unfortunately that's going to be the gist where I can help you there. On the next screen, I do have some settings that if you want to pull out your phone, I can like walk everyone through how to change them in my personal opinion. But these are all examples of there's some things I would change, but these are all examples of hotel images that were taken not by me but on an iPhone. So just to give you an idea of like you can still create very impactful images that are emotive and have an aesthetic that will attract guests without needing a professional camera. But some kind of quick notes as far as things like natural light, since you're probably not going to be investing in artificial lighting if you're doing iPhone photography, but just some kind of like brief tips is, let's say your property or bedroom or window is facing east. I would highly recommend instead of shooting directly during sunrise a couple hours after sunrise, same thing flip if you have a west facing window, shoot couple hours before sunset, just so you don't get super harsh shadows. Try to avoid shooting in directly noon because it's not going to look nice outside and you're also not going to get a lot of good light inside. Decluttering, so even using these examples on this top left image, I would probably have straightened those pillows out a little bit. The next one, I would probably have steamed the linens before shooting that. So there's just some little things that you can tweak on your own just to kind of polish it off and make it look a little bit more natural. And then before I get to my next slide, does anyone here own an Airbnb in Barcelona? Great, but I won't accidentally offend anyone by using some examples coming up. So I just wanted to kind of go this way, but yeah, so here's some examples of some iPhone photography from Airbnbs. These are pulled from Spain because I didn't want to risk anyone local. So just some examples of composition, details, and angles. So as you can see, this top image here, it's not a terrible image, but it definitely does not make me immediately want to book, even though this is a 5-star rated Airbnb in Barcelona. Good for them, but it's not something that would make me immediately want to book. Versus these bottom two images, even though you can't see the entire room, it does feel a little bit more luxurious. This post on the bottom left here did add these folded towels. It's just like a very subtle hospitality indicator. This one on the right doesn't show the full room either, but again, it's kind of the ambience of the space. So something like this top one, I would actually have lowered the angle a little bit and even zoomed in. Sometimes if you're talking about those wide angles, too much space can be a bad thing. You don't necessarily you can just show your entire room when you're selling that, but I'm gonna skip that a little bit here. But yeah, so if anyone wants to pull out their phone and change some settings, you can, or you can come up to me afterwards. These are just a couple settings I would recommend in general for. So if you go to your iPhone and go down to your camera setting, where you can take a photo of it, this top left one is under your formats setting, and at least I can always walk people through it. My husband has a phone right now. I would always recommend for higher quality using the most compatible. It will take up more space in your phone, but it is going to be a higher quality image. Yes. Yes, you'll go to settings, and then camera. And then it should show, I think for this one on the left, it's going to be under, so for the one on the left, under where it says sound, there's a spot that says formats. If you click on that, that's how you get to this screen on the left. You can change it to most compatible. I do have one of the newer iPhone models, so some of these might not be exact. You can, if you do have the option to change the photo mode, you'll usually typically see 12 megapixels or 24. 24 is the highest. I would recommend that. My professional Sony camera I use is also 24 megapixels, so you get an idea of the quality there. I won't talk too much about Pro Raw and Pro Max. If you want to come up after and talk to me about it, I can kind of walk people through it. It's a little overwhelming, I would say, but that would be the closest to like a raw out of professional camera setting. I know we're not talking a lot about video, but just for some recommendations, if you are shooting video for Reels or TikToks or any reason at all, I would always recommend shooting it at 4K at 60 frames per second. If you do not have a 4K option, then I would recommend doing the 1080 at 60. It just helps it create, you don't want to do those lower frame rates, they're a little too cinematic, and sometimes they kind of translate a little bit. So Any questions about that? Yes.
I had 16, this is the 16, right?
Oh, yes, you should be able to have some more settings.
Okay, so quarters of work format.
So you'll probably have a little bit more. I think I have like 15, so you might have some settings. And then kind of talking about some free editing apps, the actual built-in iPhone one is pretty good. Actually, I personally recommend the free Lightroom mobile app if you want to do any editing, or Snapseed, but you definitely do not have to pay to have like a fancy Lightroom subscription on your computer if you're doing just basic. And like I said, if anyone needs extra help with settings or anything like that, feel free to come back with that. Take a picture of one of that. So some kind of recommendations too I have aside from what you might already think to have in your listing. People are visual, people don't read, as I've learned myself too. So no matter what amenities you list, especially on third-party booking platforms, no one ever looks at them. So I think visually showing special amenities you have. Kind of a little anecdote, like I mentioned, I was in Spain last week with one of my girlfriends, and I always carry an international steamer with me. I did not see anything that indicated there was a steamer in this hotel, and they had a steamer, which was a very nice amenity, but it would have been nice to know I didn't need to pack my huge steamer all the way across to Europe. So these are just some examples of some things that you have that maybe other hotels might not, that you can highlight in images. So whether you have a steamer, humidifier, very helpful out in Colorado, robes or slippers. I know that seems very self-explanatory, but the amount of times I've been surprised that there are robes, I'm very excited about that. Wireless chargers, USB ports, if you have really nice co-working areas in your lobby spaces, water refill stations, and just thought about on the way over here, but if you have an espresso machine, like an espresso in your room versus a traditional coffee maker, those are just little things that it's nice to have in images because people typically don't read the amenity list a lot. Alright, talk about that a little bit. And this slide, before I kind of go more into influencer marketing and that side, just talking a little bit about first impression photos, especially when it comes to third-party booking platforms. I know we all hate them. I know everyone in Perfect World would book directly on your site, but making sure that the first photo someone sees is the best amenity photo at your property, even if it's not your room. So these were just ones when I looked at Phoenix, Arizona, just a couple properties that was the first booking picture on their page and immediately made me click in. So just kind of giving some ambiance, there's a rooftop here. Obviously it's probably a pool and a beautiful view out the window, but it does not always have to be this like big drone photo of your property. It can just be, in your opinion, like your highlighted piece of your property. It should always be your first impression photo, because I know we'll draw people in, we'll start looking at rooms and all that other fun stuff. Yeah, before I move into a little bit more about influencer marketing, does anyone have any questions on iPhone photography, or yeah, go for it.
So let's say that I take a photo and I like how it looks, but I'm sitting on my editing thing and I've got like a brightness slider and a hue slider. Like what specifically am I looking for? Is there something?
Yeah.
This is too general to even answer because it's
No,
just
yeah.
case by case. But what are you looking for when you're twiddling these sliders?
Yeah, no, great question. I'll tell you what I do with every single photo. That's probably pretty helpful. So I would say if you're doing on an iPhone, I always avoid the brilliant settings. Don't really use that one. It's a little crazy. But I would say typically instead of people's usual first instinct is to crank up the exposure setting. My typical go-to is I raise the shadows and lower the highlights. So that kind of helps create a little bit more of those HDR kind of like fancy interior photos that you'll see that create. So for example, this one on the right was most likely a lot darker inside, and they raised up the shadows. So I would typically always raise shadows, maybe lower the highlights a little bit, maybe bump up the saturation or the sharpness, but I tend not to mess too much with hues and colors unless maybe your room was like very yellow and you want to turn on the temperature. And sometimes honestly, with especially like a Lightroom mobile or a built-in camera app, the auto setting sometimes gives you like a really good starting point to mess with there. But hopefully that answers your question. I'm always happy to go like over specific examples later too. So yeah, I want to talk a little bit about influencer marketing. I kind of mentioned my background, but before I was a photographer, I worked for an influencer management platform. I have quite a lot of friends who are influencers, and I work with quite a few PR firms, so I'm pretty nerdy in the influencer marketing side of things as well. Just a quick curiosity, how many people here have utilized influencers in like their marketing strategies? Oh, cool, am I calling you later then? Give me your opinion. One of the main things that I like to mention about influencer marketing, and I will relate this to specifically for gathering imagery and videos, is that the main thing to keep in mind with using an influencer influencer or a content creator is that it is about brand awareness and not necessarily direct sales. Especially with hotels and properties, it is very, very difficult to try to track an influencer posting something to a booking because the odds of that influencer posting a video and then someone was like, oh, I actually was looking to book at that exact location next week is pretty low. So typically, I know, for example, like my Barcelona trip, I saved a lot of videos from influencers in a folder and then I went back to it later. So it is sometimes hard to track conversions there, but a lot of the benefits of using an influencer or a content creator is just getting your brand out there. I think there's a statistic where someone has to see some things like 8 times or more before they actually decide to book and buy. And if they're a fan of an influencer and they maybe have a little bit of a parasocial relationship with them and they see them there, they can kind of imagine themselves in the same environment as well. I will go over on a different slide a little bit more in depth on how to identify correct, like the right influencers. Engagement definitely matters more than followers that you've all heard, but I'm going to go into kind of how you can actually find those numbers and dissect them for yourself. And then kind of talking a little bit about repurposing influencer content and kind of how to maximize your benefits. All right, and shout out to my friend Amanda, who is a local influencer, and I took her stats for this page. But so we always hear people talk about engagement rates. Engagement rate typically means that that is a percentage of someone's followers who are engaged with them. So whether that's liking, commenting, sharing. The kind of interesting thing is that these really low numbers would seem kind of crazy. You know, if you said you had a 2% engagement rate, that's actually a good engagement rate. The higher the amount of followers, so I think, for example, Taylor Swift's account has a 1% engagement rate, to give you guys an idea. The higher the amount of followers an influencer creator has, they typically will have a lower engagement rate just because the algorithm, unfortunately, does not like to push out content to all of their followers. But here's some kind of rough numbers. If you were looking at a micro influencer, for example, maybe someone with under 10 or 5,000 followers, 5% and up would be really good. The bigger they get, you go more from 1 to 3. So using Amanda here as an example, hers typically has fluctuated anywhere from like 1.9. I've seen hers as high as 20%, just depending. Unfortunately, because saves and shares are not public information, it's hard to see those, but she does get a lot of saves and shares on her travel content. But some red flags to look out for, and I'll cover some free websites you guys can actually use to find this exact data that I pulled, is looking for low engagement but really high followers. So there is a chance that they could have fake followers or just an uninterested audience. If they have big spikes of engagement, some of these websites like Social Blade will actually show you complete spikes of follower accounts if they all of a sudden got 10,000 followers in a day, for example. Few comments, but lots of likes could also be an indicator that they're purchasing. I will say that this also, in my opinion, applies to personal brand accounts. So if your brand has a lot of followers, but you are not getting very good engagement rates, that can also create like mistrust with your brand. So I would definitely highly discourage people from purchasing followers or engagements or likes, because it really doesn't matter at the end of the day if you have 100,000 followers on Instagram. That's not necessarily of your property. So authenticity is definitely the most important. Yeah, there are some tools. This screenshot I pulled from a website, who anyone see a photo of it, called Hype Auditor. These are all completely free to get basic influencer engagement rates. Social Blade is also a really good one. I would not recommend manually calculating, but you could do that as well. And I didn't create a slide for it, but just to kind of talk a little bit about how I personally would use an influencer aside from just the exposure. Something that I would definitely talk to them about is repurposing their content for your pages. Actually, how I got started shooting hotels is I was a micro influencer in Arizona, and I would trade them stays for photos. So I do not have an audience, that's not what I'm here for, but I would give you images in exchange. So talking to them about repurposing, if they do 10 images, 15 images, they're really trying to encourage you to ask for images or videos you can then repurpose versus just having them post about your account. It's really going to be a good way. There's some extra things you can talk about, like perpetuity rights and all that kind of stuff, but I would definitely encourage you to talk to them about being able to repurpose their content. Okay. Shameless little self-plug before I wrap up here, but I do have a special offer that I think is on your QR code for anyone who's interested in getting photography done. I can always talk to you offline about it, but I think there's some details on that QR code there. Yeah, I guess to kind of wrap up, I know that was a lot of information, but I'm kind of looking forward to any other questions, comments. And I do have information on the rates and everything on the QR code.
I have a quick question. When you are like working with an influencer, and Todd, I would love to get your feedback too. But what is like an acceptable amount of content to get from them to be able to repurpose? You threw out 10 to 15 images, videos, like what would be a nice mix?
Yeah, great, and that's a really good question, because again, I came from that background. You obviously don't want to ask for the world, especially, it has been a very big hot topic about hotels and other hospitality industries not having budgets to pay influencers, so you definitely have to be willing, I think, to take less content if you do not have a budget. If you have a budget, that's always amazing. I would say a typical like fair, in my experience, a fair rate would be asking for maybe like 15 to 20 images. Maybe if they're gonna put a reel, or that's usually what nowadays people are asking for, is like raw images, and then maybe a reel or TikTok that you can collaborate with them per 2 nights. So if you're hosting someone per week, obviously you get a lot more from them. Some people are more flexible. The smaller the account, the more likely they are to be willing probably to give you more images, or if they're just starting out. But I would say that's probably a rough range I usually see, is like 15 to 20 for maybe like a 2-night hosted. 15 to 20 images and a sponsored video on their page.
Todd?
So we use influencers a lot,
Yeah.
and we have been for years. Our best influencer push was last year, and it's a couple of people working with for probably 5 years, and we got 1 million views,
Oh wow, congrats.
4.3K settings,
Wow,
and they moved our revenue stream in 2 weeks, 33
amazing.
in July. Now we give them promo codes, we do all those things to collaborate completely against them, and then that was our summer when we went into the Christmas time frame. We do this Christmas tree in the cabins and things like that, and there were a lot of openings, so we pushed to them with that type of thing. We didn't see the same thing all through, but you know, we're building this steam with it, right? As of right now, we're not paying them anything.
Yeah.
Not that, and it's ridiculous. I mean, literally sending checks to them this year, and then they ask you for just the trip back.
Mhm.
How do we find them? That's the key, right? It needs to be natural and organic. So what I said is, we watch a waterfall, it's a fly fishing waterfall, to see who's posting and tagging that fall, just to see how much activity is in there, and then an influencer will pop up in that fly fishing place, and then we use that person as our hiking influencer. So we find them by watching 5 or 6 spots around us.
Mhm.
We find people who really like those spots, who fit our brand, and then we reach out to them.
Oh yeah, that's a great.
And it's usually, most of the folks that we're working with are from 50 to 100,000 people. We're not working with 2 million. So we're working, and then what happens to us, unfortunately, is tourism sees us, so the tourism pulls them in, and tourism moves them broad, tourism moves them broadly in the state of pay. So we're getting a little bit of competition with tourism pulling this small up, because we were way ahead. We were so far ahead, it was silly, and tourism's catching up. They're seeing us, but influencers great. You figure it out, you do it more.
Yeah,
And
no,
90% of our work is Instagram.
yeah, and there are a lot of properties I've worked at that have any organic marketing. They don't really do paid ads, they don't do paid PR, they just rely on organic and influencer marketing.
And the other thing that I said earlier is like, we'll have one of our influencers, she'll look a certain way, and then when she comes back, she'll look a different way. So like, you can use the same people. She cut her hair 6 inches, because she wanted to, right? But then we see the cut, so we could bring her back, and then we just change her clothes she was wearing and things like that. And then she has a great eye. We always let the influencers drive the content, and we tell them, we sort of want this, and this, and we're gonna get out of the way. Because if you pick an influencer that can't drive content, then why are you picking an influencer? So it's the other thing.
Yeah, definitely. I think a lot of influencers, because I'm friends with quite a lot of them, their biggest thing is they don't like being asked for too much, but they are more likely to over-deliver if you ask for less. So actually, kind of a couple years ago, I was going to Vegas and pitched the Virgin Las Vegas there for 5 nights, just as a let's shoot it out there. They agreed. They only wanted 10 images for me over a 5-night period with only dinner. They had such good hospitality, I think I ended up giving them 85 images out of it, versus if they had asked me maybe for 50, I would have been more inclined to give them exactly 50. So I think a lot of times, yeah, not asking them for the role and letting them, like you said, drive the content. I've seen a lot of properties try to give people scripts, and then you notice you'll see bunch of influencers with the exact same kind of canned scripts, and it's not super authentic to their audience. So yeah, I think that's a great strategy. Going is letting them drive it, and it makes you get more excited to help you guys out, especially if they're already a fan of the property. It's pretty easy to sell.
How often would you recommend a property getting new, fresh photography? That's me.
Oh, sorry. Oh my gosh.
All good. All good.
Yeah, I think it kind of depends. Some examples, I would say a lot of my clients that are really focused on social media do have me on a quarterly basis. Some of the newer ones, like the one I showed you guys, that's newer in Breckenridge, Alpenrock, I am going monthly for them just because they have zero content. So they're trying to kind of get a bank of content before you move quarterly. But I would say it mostly just depends on how much you want to push on social media, because people do start noticing you're using the exact same photos over and over again. So I would say for people that are pushing for social media, probably quarterly. My client that I go to, Moab, because it's a little bit further, I'll be up for a week, but we go like twice. I go twice a year for like their summer and winter activities. So it kind of just depends on needs, but I would say like minimum once a year just to update, but more frequently for trying to push for social media content. Yes.
Since a lot of people hire photographers, can you talk about who owns the photo, the owner photos, or do you just license them to the people that you take photos for, and provide a license, and what does that license entail?
Yeah, great question. So as a general, from the legal standpoint, anytime anyone takes a photo, you own it. So even if you took a photo of me with your iPhone, you own that photo of me. I do not have any rights to it at all. So as photographers, and personally, I never release my copyright. The reason I don't release my copyright is because then I would no longer be able to use my photos in things like presentations or my website. Everyone is a little different. I tend to do more of an all-inclusive perpetual license for customers because of the nature of them using it for mostly like social media or their website. The different story if they need to do something on a billboard, but I typically just like to simplify it. I don't like to overcomplicate it with different time usages. I kind of just wrap that in my pricing and you just get perpetual usage. But yeah, it's a very good question to ask a photographer when you're looking to hire them, because sometimes you'll see usages as low as 3 months before you have to start paying for them, or paying for image and things like that. But typically, so you always own the copyright. It's very, very expensive to purchase copyright from a photographer, but just keep in mind we're not going to do anything nefarious with that. It's mostly just so we can still use it for our own portfolios and things like that.
Just in terms of social media utilization and like with all the algorithms and how that kind of curates itself, do you find the engagement to be better with static images versus reels or video? Depending on the platform, but and updating those static images, of course, but.
Yeah, and actually, since I do work with a lot of PR marketing teams, I pick their brains quite a bit. For Instagram specifically, obviously TikTok has always been very heavily video focused. It is very good for organic reach. Kind of a fun fact about if you are not on TikTok, if you post something on TikTok, it automatically shows it to your local market first. So sometimes if your property is trying to attract out of town guests, it's not as effective, but if you're local trying to bring people in, it automatically shows them to your local market first. For Instagram, there was obviously a very, very huge push by Meta for Reels. They've actually kind of backtracked it a little bit, and my clients especially have been noticing a resurgence in static post carousels, so posts that has multiple images, because people are spending more time scrolling through the images, they're spending longer than watching 2 seconds of a video and moving on. So I would say it's still good balance. Most people are still doing maybe every third one is a reel. A lot of them will use the professional photos as a real cover, so it still is nice and pretty on their feed. I can actually go back and you can kind of see the little icons actually from my screenshot. So like this top right one has, it looks like, I think that top one is real, 3 reels out of that whole set. The left one has 2, the left one, it's kind of hard to see from here, but I think it has 2 or 3. So it's not, they're definitely leaning less reel and video heavy than I would say even like a year ago, and kind of leaning more into carousel posts, which are what those little top right squares mean, is that those are all carousel posts. Yeah, of course, kind of the algorithm is the worst thing to try to figure out. So engagement algorithm are definitely super difficult.
Are there any other questions?
Is there a common
Yeah, do you mind being a little bit more specific, like,
Just like you're looking at someone's social media account from a hotel,
Mhm.
and you're just like, oh, I switched to it. It's so easy to fix, make everything better.
yeah, I would say kind of two things that are probably for like two very different properties. One thing I notice a lot with properties that offer like activities or adventure ones is they do not have any photos of it. They'll say on their website, like, oh, come fly fishing, come horseback riding, come do whitewater rafting, and they have no photos of doing that. It's kind of hard to envision what that's going to look like. And then I would say another kind of concern is just using very either reusing the same stock photos or original photos. Like I've seen some accounts where literally every fourth photo is the same photo because they don't have a lot to go off of, and then just not showcasing different parts of the property. I think even if the part of your property isn't like the most aesthetically pleasing, you can still find ways to showcase. Like I have a client who has a very ugly hot tub, but they want to show its hot tub, so we get a little creative with the angles and showing it's there without necessarily doing a big wide angle of it. But yeah, so I know it's a little bit of a vague answer, but it's sometimes kind of hard to see. And by the way, if anyone wants any specific feedback on any of their accounts after, I'll be here for a while. Like if you want me to go through your Instagram or anything, I'm happy to give feedback.
I have one question for you. Depending on the platform, how often should a hotel be posting something?
Yeah, great question. I think right now the algorithm, so that's what we're gonna change. I would say a lot of my clients are posting probably every other day to a couple, like minimum probably 3 times a week, up to 5 times. I don't see very many people doing it every single day. It's kind of a little bit of overkill. I will say that there has been pushes for at least doing one story every day as well. The algorithm has also showed that the first story you post of the day tends to be shown to the most people, so making sure that is the most important one that gets shown, and whether that's just like resharing tags from people tagging.
So professional photographers are awesome for static things that don't change.
Yeah.
Our hardest thing to do is winter photos around the property when the snow is right, and you know, and then you get that one where it glasses up